Everyone, thank you for joining us today for CAD Civil 3D 2013 Basic Roadway Design. My name is Lawrence Vaughn, Government Account Representative here at CAD-1. I'm also joined with Brian Haley, our resident PE, our technical specialist today. He'll be happy to answer all of your questions throughout the day as well, so please feel free to stump him. Before we get started, I do want to make sure that everybody can hear us after I did do a lame joke. So if everyone would on their right-hand side pane raise their hand to let us know that we are coming through clear. And I'll give everyone a couple seconds here to go through. That is fantastic. Thank you, everyone, for letting me know. I'll go ahead and lower everyone's hand. I appreciate that. And on this task pane, if you have not joined us on a webinar before, we would like to receive your questions throughout the whole presentation, and we'll stop and answer them again throughout our session today. So this will be where you will type in your questions, and we'll answer them appropriately as we go along. If it is something we do need to do offline, we'll go ahead and send you a private chat back, let you know that that will go and take place offline. And a few other homework items here before we get started. We do have lots of training going on this month in July. So updated times and dates are on this page, but also check our website at any time at the website address on the top of your page. But we do have several separate Civil 3D classes throughout the month now on grading, on a general update class, on Civil 3D Fundamentals, a 4-day long class. That's a great class if you haven't taken any Civil 3D training in a while, or if you're self-taught, or if you're just getting new into this application. And then we also have a Styles class towards the end of the month. So the grading, update, and Styles class are all a 1-day session, and then the Civil 3D Fundamentals is a 4-day class. And if you make it to any of these classes, you always get to keep in mind that you can come retake them at no additional cost after 4 months of your first session. So definitely take advantage of that. And also we do have a few promotions that Autodesk is offering now. Right now, one is 0% financing. Great time to take advantage of the financing. There are a few stipulations to that, nothing big, but call your account representative to take advantage of that, and I believe that ends in the middle of July 13th. And the next promotion is It's Time to Make a Move, which is a 20% off upgrades to Suite, and I believe a few other applications as well across the board. That also expires on the 13th, so get a hold of your account representative to take advantage of that before it does expire. And with that said, I'm going to hand the floor over to Brian, and Brian, you've got the floor.
Great, thanks, Lawrence. Welcome, everybody. I look forward to having a great little webinar here. Today's agenda, we are going to be talking roadway design, basic roadway design. We're not going to get into anything real, out-of-the-way, extraordinary type things. This is kind of a down-to-the-earth, what's the process of designing a road in Civil 3D. There's 4 things that we're going to be talking about during this presentation. We're going to be referring to alignments, we're going to be referring to profiles, and we're going to be referring to assemblies. These 3 things are the pieces of the roadway design that we're going to build separately, and then we're going to slam them all together to create the corridor. So that's what we've got in store today. Now, before we get going, I want to do some quick polling here. I want to find out a little bit about my audience. So let me go ahead and launch this poll here. First of all, I'd like to know, do you have your software on subscription? You know, when 2014 comes out, or whatever it's going to be, you're going to get it immediately. So let me go ahead and close this. Looks like most everybody's voted. And I'll let everybody see the results here. So it looks like the majority of everybody here is on subscription. That's fantastic. I like seeing that. Since most people here are on subscription, out of curiosity, what version are you using? So have you made the jump to 2013 yet? Maybe you're still on 2012. Maybe you're on one of those late adopters, 2011 or 2010. Maybe you're not using Civil 3D yet, and you're just here to check it out. All right, looks like most people have voted. Let's go ahead and take a look at the results. This does not surprise me in the least bit. I'm actually surprised to see that many people on 13, so this is really good. A lot of people like to wait until the first service pack of the software comes out before they'll make the jump to the latest version, but yeah, this looks pretty good. We got, looks like a couple of people are 2010 or earlier, maybe not even using Civil 3D yet, but that's all right. Hope you get to see something you like. If you're not on 2013, are you planning to upgrade anytime soon? So, you know, it's like, yeah, we're already on 13. Yeah, just mark that box. You just haven't been able to yet. Maybe you're waiting for the first service pack. You do, but you're not sure when. Or, no, we're not planning on updating for whatever reason. And if you're not planning on updating, I'd love to hear why. I mean, just maybe throw in a question if you feel like it. Don't feel like you have to or anything. All right, so it looks like most people are planning on updating. They're just not quite sure when. Some people are wanting to do it right now. Somebody else is waiting for the service pack. So that looks pretty good. All right, excellent. So let's go ahead and jump into Civil 3D. I'm not a big fan of death by PowerPoint, so I'm just going to jump right over here and talk about Civil 3D now. When you're doing roadway design, there's really three things that you have to do. In order to create your roadway design, you have to have an alignment. That's the horizontal location of the road. You have to have the profile. That's the vertical design of your road. And you have to have that typical cross-section, the assembly. You take those three things, you combine them together, you end up with a road. So we're going to be talking about alignments first. So let me go ahead and open up a drawing here. All right, it's just pausing. Apparently it decided to close down on me. So pay no attention to the man behind the screen. All right, let me get this up and running again. Sorry about that. So I want to raise of hands. Who did this come as any surprise that Civil 3D crashed? Wow, not a single hand was raised.
Not a single hand was raised.
Oh, a couple.
We were trying to get off that quick and move on before anyone raised their hand.
All right, let me go ahead and open up a drawing here. So let's see. Let me go to my files here. So if you've ever taken a class from me, you probably recognize this data set. I want to create some roads. Now there's a couple of different ways of creating roads. First of all, you can just draw it and then take whatever you've drawn and convert it to an alignment. Second of all, you can just go ahead and create the alignment because I know where it needs to go. As Stacy commented, good to see it crashes for you too. Yeah, I think it crashes for everyone. You know, the Civil 3D mantra, save often. It's getting a lot better. It still happens every once in a while, unfortunately. So I'm going to come over here and I'm just going to play around a little bit. I am going to create an alignment. But first of all, I want to draw my geometry. So I'm simply going to draw a polyline. Start the polyline command, pick my first point, pick my second point. I'm going to throw an arc in here, so I do A for arc. And let's see, I want my arc to end about there. I'm going to go back to drawing a line, and I want this to be tangent, so I'm going to play the part of the planner, and I'm going to say, that looks tangent. I'm sure nobody has ever seen that before, right? Yes, I do know how to draw a tangent line off a curve. Don't worry about that. But you get this sort of thing all the time. Right? Somebody just doesn't want to take the time to make sure it's tangent, and you get those things like that. So I'm going to create an alignment from this. So I create an alignment from objects. Select the polyline. I want the stationing to start at the left, so I pick near the left-hand side. It's going to ask me for the direction. That works. And then it's going to ask me for information. So I'm going to give this a name. So this is going to be Becky's Way. My wife's name is Becky, and it's always her way. I've been married 13 years. I have learned that. Stationing. I want to start at station, say 1 + 0, 0, so 100. Assign a site, a style, labels. If you want to, you could have it automatically add curves between any angle points in your alignment. We also have something known as design criteria. So the design criteria is used for roadway design, specifically roadway design. So I can assign a design speed, and based off of that design speed, I can assign different criteria based off of super elevation. So if I'm allowed to do a 4% super elevation at 60 miles an hour, I have to have this minimum radius. At 20 miles an hour, I have to have this minimum radius. Things along those lines. In this case, I'm not going to be using criteria-based design. I'm just going to be laying out a basic road. And it creates the alignment for me. And oh, look, there's a mistake somewhere. Gee, what could that possibly be? So I come in here and I look at it and I get this nice little warning symbol here. I point my mouse at the warning symbol and look, the tangency is violated. So this is one way of creating alignments. Yes, you can go in and edit that alignment and make it tangent. It's real simple to do if you know how. You go into your geometry editor. Right, you bring up this vista or grid view or whatever you want to call it, and I just change it from being a fixed entity so that it's constrained on both sides. So it's a free entity. And that fixed the tangency violation there for me. So now it's tangent to both the incoming and the outgoing line. Now it had to change the geometry a little bit. So perhaps the endpoints of the lines aren't at the same locations, but I'd much rather have it be tangent than have the ends of the lines at those exact locations. So this is one way of doing it. Another way of creating an alignment is just to create the alignment. So under the alignment pull down here, I can create an alignment. Give it a name. So that was Becky's Way. So this one is going to be Brian's Place. I bet you didn't see that one coming. I want this one to be 10 + 0, 0. Likewise, I can assign a site, style, labels, design criteria. If you notice, I don't get those conversion options because, well, I'm not converting anything. So I select OK. And now I can come in here and I can create tangents. I can draw tangents with curves. I can draw them without curves. I can come down here and I can set the curve values if I want to have it automatically create the curves for me. So I'm going to come over here and I'm going to create an alignment here for a set place. So I'm simply going to draw tangents with curves. My curve radius, well, for this particular little road here, 200 feet is way too much. I'm going to set it to 20 feet. And I'm going to come in here and I'm going to draw tangents with curves. Snap to the center line of my road. Oh, wrong spot. Snap to the intersection of a couple lines, so the intersection of that line and that line there. And then I want to come all the way down here and snap to the end of that line there. And when I do that, it creates my alignment for me. Let me turn a couple layers off here, just to make life a little bit easier. Oh, too many. Hate it when I do that. Get rid of my water and my... I'm turning off my utilities here. So I've got an alignment here. The radius isn't quite right. Grab the alignment, use the grips, change the alignment. Now I know I want this alignment to have a radius of 50 feet. So if you have your dynamic input turned on, I like the words rather than the icons personally. I can simply grab this little triangle grip here and type in a radius of 50 feet. And it'll change the radius for me. Dynamic input is great. I love dynamic input. When I first came out, I hated dynamic input, and then I was forced to teach it. And now I actually like it. If you're not using your dynamic input, I recommend you try it again. Here I'm getting an alignment for Jeffers Ranch Road. Let's go ahead and create an alignment for that. This time I'm going to create an alignment from the object. Come in here, I select the object, and you'll notice it's not letting me select it. The reason it's not letting me select it is it's in an XREF. Just about any time Civil 3D asks you to select an object and it's in an XREF, you can type X or XREF. Grab this alignment, create an alignment from it. So I created an alignment from an object that was in an XREF. So these are my alignments. Next thing I need to do is I need to create a profile. Now typically you're going to be working with surfaces as well. Now in this particular drawing I don't have a surface in here yet, so let me go ahead and data reference one. Oh, alright, let me go ahead and set this to the right location here real quick. Give me a second, I should have had this done prior, shouldn't I have? Anybody wants a refund, we'll be glad to give you one.
This is a good time as a reminder here too to ask questions. If you do have a question, anything as Brian is covering, definitely make sure to type them in through our presentation, and we'll go ahead and approach those as they come through. So feel free to ask as many questions as you like.
Setting it to the wrong location. Give me just a second here. I got it. There we go. So here I've got a surface. Let me go ahead and reference in my surface. So it's just the existing ground surface. Your name cannot be empty. One more time. QRST. Sorry about this, folks. Oh, look at that. I did have one in there. It was just set to no display. Alright, so here is my surface. I want to know what the existing ground surface is doing along the alignment, so I create a profile. So profile, I'm going to create a surface profile. Surface profile shows me exactly what's happening along my alignment. So this is going to be, oh, I did not do a good name in renaming these, so let me go ahead and select this alignment in the drawing. I want to sample the existing ground. I add that in as a profile. I can come over here and I can change the style. Existing ground profile works. I want to see this in my drawing, so I create a profile view. In here I can specify the starting and ending stations, the height, the display options, what profiles do I want to see. One thing I will always do is I will always double check my labels. So when you're creating profile views, stop at the profile display options and double check your labels. Got some data bands, some hatching. I create my profile view, pick a point in the drawing, and it creates my profile view for me. And where's my profile? Wow, this webinar is going well. Could you give me my degrees? Oops, wrong button. Alright, let me try this one more time. I did it for the wrong surface, that's why. Set it down for this one. There we go. And there's my profile. So this is the existing ground. Along the alignment, this is what the existing ground surface is doing. Once you have the existing ground surface, now this is optional. You don't have to have an existing ground surface to design a road. Most of the time you will. If you give me just a second here, my batteries in my mouse is running dead, so let me swap these out real quick. Ah, much better. Thank you, Lawrence. So now that I have something that I can design off of, I'm going to go ahead and create my profile. My design profile in this case. And that's done through the profile creation tools. It's going to ask you to select the profile view. You have to have a profile view in order to create a design profile. Give it a style, give it a name, a layer. All right, so this is going to be Ecky's Way Finished Ground. Use a complete label set. Just like my alignment, my design profile can use a design criteria. So based off of the design speed, what's the minimum K value of my vertical curves? It brings up a toolbar for me, just like I had for my alignment. Here I'm going to draw tangents. In this case, I'm going to come back and add my curves later myself. So I'm just simply going to draw tangents. And I want to start at, well, let's take a look at our side over here. So at about station 200, I need to tie into the existing, for the design of the other subdivision. And I want to come down into my site at 2% for 150 feet. So I need to put a 200-foot curve in here. So at station 200, I need to have a specific elevation, and just to make my life easier, I'm going to pick an elevation of 200. And I'm going to come down at 2%. I like the number 2. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use one of these cool transparent commands over here. If you haven't been playing around with the transparent commands, these things are awesome. I'm going to use a transparent command that says Profile Station Elevation. I'm going to select my profile view. It's then going to ask me what station do I want to draw at. I can pick it on the screen if there's something for me to snap to, but in this case, I simply want to type in a station of 200. What elevation do I want to start at? Likewise, if there's something on the screen I want to start at, I can pick it on the screen. If not, I can always type it in. So I'm going to start at an elevation of 200. And it just picked that point in the profile view for me. Now, I don't know what the next station and elevation needs to be, so I'm going to hit Escape once. That takes me out of the transparent command back into just my regular old prompts for whatever command I was in. And now I'm going to do a different transparent command of profile, grade, and length. I want to go 150 feet down at 2%. So it's going to ask me for the grade, so I'm going to do a -2%. It's going to ask me for the length. I'm going to do 150 feet. And it draws in my profile. I'm done doing the profile station length. I'm going to hit Escape here. And it takes me back into my regular old prompt. So maybe I want to come down here, up here, something like this, and then maybe snap into the existing ground over here. Something along those lines. If I want to make some changes, I can do that. Just grab it, grip edit, maybe pull this thing down here a little bit more. Maybe pull it over here, maybe pull this up this way a bit. There's lots of things you can do to edit this. I've got the profile created. I want to add in some vertical curves now. I have tools up here on my toolbar that allow me to put in vertical curves. So I'm going to do a free vertical curve based off of the PVI. Picking a point near the PVI, and it asks me for the length of the curve. So I'm going to put in a length of 200 feet here. Hit enter, and it labels it up for me. Ooh, I got some label issues going on in this drawing. All right, repeat the same process. This one's going to have a length of maybe 100 feet, and this one's going to have a length of 200 feet. and it creates my profile for me. Adds the vertical curves to it. So I've got two of the three pieces done. I've got my profile, I've got the alignment, now I need that cross-section. And in Civil 3D, that cross-section is known as an assembly. So I'm going to create an assembly. Take a point on this, give it a name, so this is going to be a basic road. If you're doing some fancy highway type design, there's all sorts of things you can do here. If you're in 2013, you can also choose this to be a railway assembly. But in my case, I'm doing a fairly simple road. I'm going to leave it set to other. Select OK, pick a point in my drawing, and it creates my assembly for me. Ooh, how exciting. So this thing here is my assembly. It runs horizontally along my alignment, vertically along my profile. To this, I would then want to attach sub-assemblies. And my sub-assemblies build out my cross-section for me. Your sub-assemblies are found on your tool palettes. So up here on your ribbon, on the palettes panel, you have the option to bring up tool palettes. You can also type TP for tool palettes, Control 3. We'll also bring them up. So I want to build out my road cross-section. So I go find the different pieces of my assemblies that I want to use. In this case, I want to put in a lane. So I'm going to choose lane. I'm going to use my go-to lane subassembly. This is the lane super elevation AOR. AOR stands for axis of rotation. It's a great subassembly. It can be extremely simple if you want it to be really simple, but it can also be extremely versatile if you need it to be. So I'm going to choose Lane Super Elevation AOR. It's going to open up my properties. It's also going to ask me where do I want to attach it. So I set the properties, and then I attach it to the assembly. In this case, I'm going to do a couple of things. If you're not using the fancy super elevation stuff, I recommend turning off potential pivot point. If you leave this on, you'll get those yellow flags in your assembly. They're really important if you're doing divided highways with different super elevation methods and things like that. But if I'm just doing a basic road, yeah, I don't need this to be a potential pivot point. So I'm going to set that to no. As you can see in this case, it's going to be a 12-foot wide lane, and it's going to have a cross slope of 2%. If that's all you're worried about, that's all you need to set. If you want to, you can come in here and start applying different material depths. You can use super elevations. You can do an inside point other than a crown. Oh, it's all sorts of fun stuff here. But in this case now, I'm just going to attach it to my assembly. I select my assembly, and it attaches the road to the assembly. Once I have my lane in, I now want to put in the next piece of my cross-section. In this case, I'm going to be using curb and gutter. So I'll come to my Curbs tab, and I'm going to use Urban Curb Gutter General in this case. This is the vertical curb and gutter. So I choose Urban Curb Gutter General. Once again, I come down through here and I set all these parameters. Now this gets a little confusing here because I don't remember what dimension D is, or F, or G, or A, or B. So what are all these dimensions here? Well, if you go into the help file for your subassembly, to access the help, right-click on the subassembly name and choose Help. They've done an outstanding job with the help system here for subassemblies. So here it's showing me where all those different dimensions are, and I can set them to be whatever I need. If I'm a little bit confused, you can scroll down a bit, and it'll tell you what dimension A is. Dimension A is the depth of the gutter to the flange point. It's a numeric, positive, non-zero number that defaults to 7 inches. That's dimension A. Has to be positive, has to be non-zero. So now I can come in here. Now that I know what all these different values mean, I come in here and I set them the way I want them to be set. I'm just going to use the default values here. I then attach it to the location within the assembly that I want it to be added. In this case, I want the flange of my gutter to attach to the edge of the road. So I select that marker in the assembly. Don't snap to the center of it. Select it. And it attaches my curb to that lane. If I want to put a sidewalk in here, so I'm going to choose an urban sidewalk. I want a nice tree lawn. I'm going to put in a 6-foot inside boulevard. That's my tree lawn. Maybe I put in a 2-foot outside boulevard. I want to attach this to the back walk. And I have my sidewalk in here now. And then I just continue to build out my cross-section. It can be really simple. It can be very complex. This is the end of my typical section from this point on. If I'm in a fill situation, I want it to daylight down. If I'm in a cut situation, I want it to daylight up. So I use a daylight subassembly. The one I'm going to use in this case is daylight standard. There are lots of options here, but I'm going to go with daylight standard here. Fill in the different parameters. As you can see, this particular one has lots of different options. I'm going to attach to the outside boulevard here. And as you can see, in a fill situation, this green line just goes down. In a cut situation, it's actually going to put in a ditch and then go up. So I've now modeled out half of my roadway. I'm going to take this and then mirror it to the other side. Now, when you're dealing with sub-assemblies, you want to try to avoid using the AutoCAD copy, move, and mirror, because all it does is it adjusts where it is relative to what it's attached to. So all your sub-assemblies have an attachment. So this is attached to my curb and gutter. If I were to move this someplace else just using the AutoCAD move command, you can see how anything that was attached to it moved along with it. But this point is still attached to that top back of curb with a displacement now. So you just have to be aware of it. There are times when you would want to move an assembly, sub-assembly, but for the most part, you want to use the editing tools that come with Civil 3D. So I want to mirror this to the other side of the assembly. I grab all of the sub-assemblies. Up there on my ribbon, I then have the copy, move, and mirror sub-assembly commands. In this case, I am going to mirror my sub-assembly. Now, the mirror command here is, I like to refer to it as a mirror to command. So it's actually going to take my sub-assemblies, copy them, flip the insertion side, and say, well, what do you want to attach to? So in this case, I'm going to attach them to the assembly. And it mirrors it on over. I now have my assembly. All right. A couple of things that I like to do with my assemblies. This assembly I'm going to be using all the time. I work in the city of Bryanville, and the Bryanville standards say this is the type of road we like to have. And I do lots of work in Bryanville. I want to be able to share this assembly with the rest of my projects. So on my tool palettes, I can actually create another palette. So I'm going to put it up here next to my other assemblies. Right-click on a palette, choose New Palette, give it whatever you want. I'm going to call this one Bryanville. I can then take my assembly, grab the assembly, and then press and drag without using grips to my tool palette. When I release, it's then going to copy this assembly to my tool palette. There's my basic road. So now anytime I go into a new drawing, so I'm just going to make a brand new blank drawing here, I can left click on my assembly on my tool palettes, left click in my drawing, and it creates my assembly for me. So I've got the three things that I need for my roadway design. I've got the horizontal design, the alignment. I've got the vertical design, the profile. I've got the typical cross-section, the assembly. I now take all three of those things, cram them together, and I create a corridor model. So I'm going to run the create corridor command. Now, if you're in 2012 or earlier, this is actually broken up into two different options. You have create corridor and create simple corridor or something like that. In 2013, it's one command. So I'm going to run the corridor command, give it a name. I don't know, call it Lawrence Subdivision. Probably misspelled your name. That's all right. Give the corridor style, layer, the alignment. So you have to have an alignment. You have to have a profile for that alignment. You need an assembly. So I choose all three of those things. If my assembly can target things, for example, my daylight lines. My daylight lines can target a surface for the daylighting process. Well, what surface do you want those to target? So I want them to target the existing site. You can then also come in here and set the baseline and region parameters. So if you leave this toggled on, this is very similar to the 2012 create corridor command. If I uncheck this, this is along the same lines of the create simple corridor. So I'm going to toggle this on because, well, I need to set some parameters here. And I have baselines, and I have regions. I'm going to expand this out a little so it's easier to see all this wonderful text. So a baseline indicates, hey, I want you to use this alignment and this profile. And that's pretty much it. The region is where all the fun stuff comes into play. So the region says, okay, for this baseline, for this alignment and this profile, I want to assign this assembly from this station to this station, and I want to do it this often. And I want it to target these things. So all of that is contained in the region. Now what I want to change here is I want to change my start station and my end station. Because, well, my profile doesn't begin at the very beginning here. So I want to change my start station to the same station I used, 200. Now when I created my profile, I typed in that number. So I can type in 200 here. No problem with that. But my ending station, let's go see what station my ending station ends at. All right, so it's 11 plus 30.01. So in this case, I actually snapped to the profile. Now, so I snapped to something here as I was laying out my profile. What station did I snap to? Did I snap to station 11 plus 30.01? Possibly, but very, very unlikely. Most likely, I snapped to a number that rounds to 11 plus 30.01. So if my profile actually ends at station 1130.009, there is no profile at station 1130.01. And so if I type in the number 1130.01 for my corridor ending station, there is no profile there. My corridor is going to dive down to an elevation of 0. And if you're here in this area in Colorado or Wyoming, that's not good at all. It's a very, very steep road. So what I'm going to do is I always like to buffer my unknowns just a little bit. So instead of 1130.01, I'm going to type in 1130.00 in this case. So if it's at the end, I'm going to buffer it down a little bit. If it's the start, I'm going to buffer it up a little bit, just to make sure that I'm within the limits of the profile. I'm going to select OK here. I'm going to rebuild my corridor. And now I have my corridor built here. So now I have my corridor. Great. What do I do with it? Well, most likely you're going to want to build a surface from it. So I'm going to come here, I'm going to grab my corridor, and I'm going to build a surface from the corridor. I'm going to my corridor surfaces. And remember, folks, if you have questions as I'm going through this, make sure you type them in. I can't answer questions unless I know what they are. And I'm going to create a surface. So I'm going to add a surface in here. I'm going to give it a name. I'm going to call this one Roadways. Give the surface a style. So I'm going to assign a 1 foot and 5 foot design type style. What data do you want to add? There's lots of types of data. There's 2 types of data. You can add links or feature lines. Links go along the section. Feature lines connect points between the sections. In this case, I'm going to add in my top links. Your top links represent the top of your design. Datum link represents the bottom of your design. I add that in. Select OK. Go ahead and rebuild my corridor. And it creates my surface for me. Yeah, it looks like you got a couple of issues going on here. So I've got surface going out way beyond the limits of my corridor. So my corridor actually ends here, but my surface comes all the way out here. Well, why is that? Well, I have corridor data here and I have corridor data here, and the surface just comes through and triangulates between them. I never told it not to. So I need to come in and add some more data here. What am I going to add? I'm going to add in a boundary to my surface. So I go back to my corridor surfaces. I have a boundaries tab here. And in this case, I just want the corridor to end at the extents of the I want the surface to end at the extents of the corridor. So I choose corridor extents as outer boundary. Basically, this does a shrink wrap. Select OK, rebuild the corridor, and there's my beautiful surface. Let's go ahead and take a look at the surface in 3D. And there's my surface. Wow, no questions. Come on, guys, gotta help me out here. Ask some questions. I'm almost done. Now, I do want to show one more thing here. I have a bus pull out right about here. So I need to make this particular lane extend out wider so my buses can pull off and drop off all the wonderful little soccer players that are going to come over here and play soccer. So I'm going to draw the edge of my asphalt simply with the polyline. So I draw a polyline, and I'm going to snap to my edge of asphalt, which is about there, and say, oh, I want it to come out here, I want it to go over here, and I want it to come back over here, something like this. Just a polyline. You would want to be a little bit more precise with this when you do it, but I'm just going to show you how simple this is to do. I'm then going to grab my corridor, and I'm going to edit the targets for this region. I want this lane to continue out until it hits that polyline. So I'm going to edit my targets. Right, which region do I want to edit them for? Well, I only have one region here. What am I trying to target? Well, I'm trying to target my lane on the right-hand side. So over here where it says it's not targeting anything, I'm going to change that. So I choose the word none. It then allows me to target something. By default, it's going to ask me for an alignment. So I've already made a change here. But in this case, I want to choose, so you could choose either alignments or feature line survey figures and polylines. So I choose polylines. I select the polyline in the drawing. If you want to, you can grab everything that's on that layer. Grab that polyline. It adds that to the list of targets. You can have multiple things that it'll target. Select OK. Rebuild my surface corridor. Rebuilds my surface, and as you can see, I now have a bus pullout here. All right. So that's roadway design in a nutshell. 3 things you have to have: an alignment, a profile, and a cross-section. Take those 3 things, combine them together, you end up with a corridor model, and this is what we use for our roadway design. So I was expecting questions, so if you guys have any questions, now is a great time to ask them. I know I'm not that good, that there's absolutely no questions whatsoever. So if anybody has any questions, if not, we're going to go ahead and end the webinar here. So I'll give you a few minutes. Do you have anything you want to say, Lawrence?
I do not, but as a reminder, the question task pane's on the right, kind of in the middle, towards the bottom section. Type them in as we go, and we will answer them as we go through. We did have a few come in here.
All right, looks like we got some questions. Tiffany says, fillet that sidewalk. So you want to fillet just the sidewalk, or do you want to fillet the whole thing here? You can answer that question real quick. Oh, so instead of these sharp angles, you want to do a fillet. Does that sound fair? All right. She says, yeah. So I'm modifying the polyline. So let me go ahead and do this here real quick. Let me, I'm not sure if you guys know this, but this multi-function grip stuff is pretty slick. I'm going to go ahead and add a vertex here. I'm just going to kind of pick something out here in the middle of nowhere. I'll come over here and I'll adjust my polyline. So it's now the way it was. I'll do the same thing over here. Add a vertex. Up there somewhere. So I just modified the vertex. What radius do you want on these, Tiffany? I'll run the fillet command.
5.
I'm going to change my radius to 5 according to Tiffany, because she does lots of roadway design with bus pullouts of things that guys have hand drawn in here. And I'm going to simply do the polyline. So I do P for polyline. I grab the polyline and I filleted the polyline. So 5-foot radius is pretty small. It's hard to see. So I'm going to make it a bit bigger, just so it's a little bit more obvious in the webinar interface. So I'm going to fillet this. I'm going to change my radius, say, to 20 feet. And I'm going to do P for polyline. And that looks a little bit better. It's just easier to see. What do I do now? I've made this change to this target. Well, simply rebuild the corridor. Grab the corridor up there on the ribbon, rebuild it. And as I rebuild it, you'll see the corridor updates. So now it's filleted. Ooh, I want to get a little bit more definition in here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to increase the frequency of the corridor right here in this area. I'm going to split this region. I want to increase the frequency from about there to about there. And I can now edit the frequency of just this area. Say, hey, I want to do it every 2 feet to give me a little bit more definition here. And there's my fillet. All right, what else do we have?
All right, another question. When adding vertical curves, how do the other curves work?
How do the other curves work? So when I put in vertical curves, so let me go ahead and grab those vertical curve options here. I got a bunch of different options for vertical curves. As far as the free vertical curves go, we have the free alignment, free asymmetrical, free circular, and a free parabolic vertical curve. It's not parabolic, it's parabolic. All right, so this is the one I'd say 99.99% of all roadway design is done with. It's a parabola. I've only heard of, I haven't actually seen it, one person that wanted to do a circular curve on a roadway design, and I believe he was in Russia somewhere, and they actually use circular curves there. Some of these other ones are floating curves, so I draw in a line and I can float a curve off the end of it. So it's always going to be tied into that curve. I can do pass-through points. I need to make sure that my curve passes through this specific point. Things along those lines. Fixed curve, basically you pick 3 points and it creates a curve. And there's other options here as well. So there are lots of options here. You can actually create reverse vertical curves or compound vertical curves using these tools. I have written that procedure up on my blog if you're interested. Let me know and I can get you that website. All right, what else do we have?
Next question here. How about intersections?
Intersections. Well, that's a whole other webinar in and of itself. To do this briefly, there's an intersection command right there up there on the ribbon. The last webinar I did was on intersections. I believe we've got that posted up on our website somewhere. So check that out.
Okay. Next question. Is the mirror assembly new in 2013?
Is the mirror assembly new in 2013? Let's see. I believe this is fairly new. I believe it was introduced somewhere around 2007. So it's been around a really long time. A lot of people just haven't known about it. In order to get to it in those earlier versions, you'd actually have to select it, right-click, and then you'd get to those options. What else we got?
All right, next question here is, can you get blue top report or slope stake report from the corridor data?
Blue top report. Oh, that's a good one. So this would be grading information. So as I send the grader out, I want to get down to the sub base or the bottom of the sub base. The staking reports. Absolutely, you can. First of all, you could just do it from the surface. So I can create that datum surface. The datum surface will actually follow along the bottom of my road, and I can just stake out according to the surface. But I can also create points from a corridor. So it's going to ask me for a corridor. What code do I want to set the points on? So I go choose the codes that I want to create the points for, and it creates those points for me. So check that out. Hopefully that'll get you pointed in the right direction.
All right, back to the fillet you were working on just a couple minutes ago. A comment was made that the sidewalk looks like it narrows along your fillet.
Good catch. So what is happening here in this situation is my sidewalk didn't narrow, it is just skewing. So I put in what did I say? Let me go check my subassembly here real quick. So I put in, let's see, come on, a 6-foot boulevard, a 5-foot walk, and a 2-foot boulevard. So when I come over here to the sidewalk, at this location, it's still 6-foot, 5-foot, 2-foot. It's always going to be measured that way, perpendicular to my baseline. So as those things start changing like that, they're skewing. So it's not technically narrowing, but that's the effect you get. If I were to go stake this thing out, it would be a narrower sidewalk. If you need to make sure that this thing stays 6 foot, all the way down through here like this, which right now it's not, you need to create what's known as an assembly offset. So an assembly offset, for example, would follow along the back of curb of my corridor. I would need to have an alignment that follows along here, as well as a profile. I'm going to attach that offset assembly to that location. And then when I do that, this section line would come out, hit that offset, that alignment, and then the offset assembly would then go perpendicular to the alignment that it was attached to. So in situations like that, that's how you would take care of it. If you've got a fairly small skew, tell the contractor it's a 6-foot sidewalk.
All right, next question. Are the warnings when we're building a problem that has to be dealt with, or are these to be expected?
That's a good question. That depends. So the warnings that you're talking about, so when I come in here and I rebuild this corridor, you see this event viewer pops up with all these hundreds and thousands of warnings. What are these warnings saying in this particular case? Well, this particular case is saying, okay, well, you got this target, this polyline here. I've told this corridor to target this polyline. It is telling me that at this station, it can't target that polyline. Oh, and by the way, at this station, it can't target this polyline. And at this station, and at this station, and at this station, and all of these stations, it can't target that polyline. So that's what these particular warnings are talking about. So in this case, these are benign errors, nothing to be worried about. So I can just close out of it. Now, you need to check the warnings to make sure that it's a situation like that. But that's what I see 90% of the time when I'm dealing with corridors and I get errors like that.
Okay. All right, next question here. How would you go about doing takeoffs from the corridor?
Takeoffs from the corridor. Well, that depends upon the kind of takeoffs that you want. If you're trying to get length of things or areas of things, you would use the takeoff manager. So under the Analyze tab on your ribbon, you have the QTO manager. So I'm going to go ahead and load a pay item here real quick. Let me just grab one. So I've got all these pay items in here. So I would take a pay item and I would assign it to the corridor. And the way you assign a pay item to a corridor is through your code set style. So when you create the corridor, you get the option to do a code set style. So here's my code set styles. And the one I'm using here is this all codes code set style. And in here I can then assign pay items to the different codes. So I can assign curb and gutter to the flow line code in my corridor. I can assign asphalt to the asphalt link in my corridor to get an area. So this is one way of doing it. So I can just come over here and start assigning pay items. The other way, if you want to get, say for example, earthwork volumes or volume of asphalt or volume of concrete, you do that through the compute materials command here. And just to do this briefly, in order to do this, first thing you have to do, you have to sample cross-sections. You sample the cross-sections, you use the compute materials command, and it calculates those materials based off of the cross-sections. So great, guys, thank you for the questions. I hope that answers them. We'll stay online here a little bit to answer any other questions y'all may have. But for now, we're going to go ahead and close things down. So thank you all for coming. We really do appreciate it. And we'll look forward to seeing you next time. The next webinar we're going to be doing is going to be Civil Chat, where you can come in and ask, well, just about any question you want regarding Civil 3D. It's an open forum. It's pretty laid back, good to go, and we have a lot of fun with it. So hope to see you all there. Have a great weekend, and take care.